going to be watching this video of Beth starting Dylan. And when Beth first came to interview for the assistant trainer position at Equus Curito Equine Center, this is what we saw. This was the biggest area we saw that she was just absolutely shining in, was the colt starting. She has a process and a method that I have not seen before. And I've seen a lot of different colt starting methods. I've started a lot of my own colts, but I really love the way she goes through the process. It's just like any other day for the horse, and it's in a relaxed manner, but she's getting the horse's respect and attention through the whole process. You'll see it a little bit differently than some other methods you might have seen. She's not in a round pen. That's one of the biggest things that stands out with her method. So I'm going to go ahead and let her start talking us through the process of what she's seeing as we watch this video and what she was seeing in the horse.
Okay, so just a second ago I was just lunging Dylan a little bit. I was just checking out what he knew, making sure his feet were moving and his attention was on me. Dylan's been saddled once before, but he still isn't a fan of the process, so that's why he's a little squirrely here.
How long does it usually take to get a horse to where they're just like nonchalant about the saddling process?
Every horse is different. It just sort of depends on how much go each horse has. Dylan isn't a very sticky horse. He doesn't like to sit still and let you do things to him. He's very much I will remove this pressure on my own, thank you very much kind of horse.
He's kind of busy-minded. Like, there's always something going on up there.
Yeah, he's very busy-minded. So he doesn't really like to hold his feet still at all for you. So that's one of the issues with saddling him.
So for saddling, that can kind of be a problem. But then for riding later, that stickiness, some horses being sticky, they might stand still perfectly for the saddling process. But then when you go to get those first few steps riding, you might experience something different, right?
Yeah, I much prefer a forward motion horse over a sticky horse, just because when you go to get on them, if they're being sticky, you have to put more pressure on them to get them to go. And for those first couple of rides, if you get real too big with them and add too much pressure, some of them just want to blow up, which of course is what you're trying to avoid.
So, not our friend during the saddling process, but going to be our friend during the riding process, all this forward motion that he has.
Right. And you'll see, I'm not saddling him up when he's tied up, even though he's already been saddled once before. I know he's a little jittery. I don't like to tie up and saddle the first few times, just because if something were to go wrong, if he were to get jittery, pull back, buck, what have you, that can cause some real issues, not just with the saddling in the long run, but even with the tying up.
And you don't have a second person holding him.
No. I find that just sort of gets in the way. I really don't like to force horses into anything, whether you're tying them. I don't like to hard tie them. I don't like to put equipment on them that forces anything out of them. I like a lot of things that encourage movement or encourage a certain position out of them, but nothing that forces them.
So walk us through what kind of happened there. He stood and let you get him cinched up. Your back cinch is still down. He went off bucking.
So the back cinch I like to keep down just for a couple of minutes, let it flop around, let them get used to something hanging out down there, just because a lot of horses, if they touch something the first time, it freaks them out. This is just a little bit of an extra desensitizer to them. He took off bucking, and I immediately corrected him. Normally, if I was the first person to do the saddling, I would let them buck a few times, let them figure out that bucking doesn't remove the saddle. But because Ashley's already saddled him once and I already knew that, I went straight to correcting him when he bucked. I want him to learn that bucking isn't the answer and that I will correct him and make him move his feet when he does it.
So pretty much his only wrong answers would be not moving at all or bucking at this point.
Yep. I don't really care where he goes once I'm on top of him, as long as he's doing it politely, which he's trying really hard not to do right now.
It's kind of, you can see he's a little conflicted. Like, he's like, I want to listen to you, but I really want to go do this, my own thing over here.
And you'll see when I correct him, I'm just changing directions on him. I'm pulling his head around, making him move his feet again, because when a horse takes off bucking, you're losing control over their body and their feet, which is what they want. They don't want anyone but themselves to have control over their feet. So by switching their direction and making them move their feet in a different way than they were originally going, you're gaining control over them again.
And that's a respect thing, too, because they're having to check back in with you, and it's like, oh yeah, I have to listen to you again. Which is a lot for these young horses. I mean, like we talked about, he's busy-minded, but a lot of the babies are.
Yes, and he hasn't, other than being saddled, he's done lots of groundwork. His owner's done a very good job with that. But this is his first time being ridden, and he's being asked a lot of him today. So
this is the most he's ever had asked of him.
Yep. So it's a lot of pressure on them, and until it's like throwing a kid into first grade right off the bat, expecting them to do really well. You got to get them used to having something to do. Let them figure out what it's like to have pressure put on them and the problem solving that they have to do.
So I noticed, like, with all of your movements and when you correct them, there's a big difference between when you're being soft and when you're correcting them. There's not, like, you're not slowly upping the pressure, you're not tiptoeing around them. It's like, you're right or you're wrong. I'm either leaving you alone or I'm telling you that wasn't it.
Yes, there's a language barrier between horses and people, and that's an issue that a lot of people have. They forget that horses don't speak English. They don't know exactly what we're asking right away. And so it's up to us as humans to make it clear to them, this is right and this is wrong. If you have too many gray areas, that's when you have horses that get very confused. And oftentimes the horse looks like they're being really rude, they're being pushy, they're being jerks. But oftentimes it's just because that horse has been allowed to hang out in too many gray areas and they just don't understand what is and is not acceptable of them. And then people tend to get upset at them when that happens.
So what was that right there?
This is Dylan not wanting to move forward. He's not giving to the pressure on the halter. He doesn't like me. He doesn't want to come up to me. So I'm making him move his feet.
And this has been his first introduction to you, is that you've saddled him, which he doesn't like yet, and you're telling him what to do, and you're being very clear about it. He knows what you want, but it's like, man, this chick has some demands here.
Yeah, I had the hold of the lead rope for all of about 60 seconds maybe before I actually started recording this, and that was the first time I had ever touched him. So it went straight from hanging out with his mom, who is his pal, to me, who's making him work.
Yeah, he loves Susan. He'll do anything she wants him to do. I had several sessions with him when I was doing groundwork that after the session it was like, Mom, save me. He wanted to go back with her afterward.
He's smart. He knows who makes him work hard.
Yeah.
So here you can see that I'm going to do a lot of ups and downs on him. I think it's very important to make sure that the horse understands that they are to stand still when I'm doing the mounting process.
So even right from the beginning.
Yep. I don't let them walk off at all. And I'm not being very gentle. I'm not tiptoeing around him. I'm actually kind of poking him with my toes when I'm doing this, just because I want him from the get-go to get used to some of that pressure there.
So if something's going to happen, it's going to happen, and you're just going to deal with it as it comes.
Yep. So a lot of people tend to forget to teach their horse that not everything that they're doing requires something out of them. Sometimes you're just moving. Sometimes you're just touching them somewhere. It doesn't always mean that it's pressure and pushing on them. But that's that gray area again where you're not making it clear exactly of whether or not they are supposed to do something and whether or not something is acceptable. So my body is relaxed. I'm not using any vocal cues with him other than maybe telling him, whoa. I'm making it clear that this is just an action. I'm just touching you here. I'm not actually asking anything of you.
So I see you pause if he moves as you're getting down.
Yep, if you get down as they're moving, then that's just me telling him that I accept you moving when I'm getting down. And them standing still when you're dismounting is just as important as them standing still when you're mounting. Not only is it a respect thing, it's a safety thing.
That sets the stage for how they handle the mounting process their whole lives.
Exactly. And you see, I don't know how many you've seen, but I have seen quite a few wrecks where people have allowed their horse to walk off, and then something happens, something spooks the horse, or the horse just decides it doesn't want the owner up there, and someone's halfway up, and the horse takes off and bucks, and somebody ends up coming off and getting hurt.
Getting up and down is like the most vulnerable you are with your horse, really. Once you're on, that's one thing, but if they do anything before you get that other foot in the stirrup or as you're swinging up or down, man, that's tough to recover from.
Yep, so might as well nip that in the butt the first time you go to get up on them.
So what are you asking for here?
Here I'm actually asking for some forward motion, and he gave it to me a lot quicker than most horses do. A lot of horses will give their nose and swing their butt around and actually do a turn on the forehand, which is not what I'm asking of them. I want forward motion, meaning that their front end is moving. I'll see a lot of horses that'll happily move their hind end around, and you feel like you're getting somewhere with it, but then the first time they actually take that real true step with that front end, that's when something happens. They're either going to move off and they're going to think about it, or they're going to react, which you don't want them to.
So it's the front end getting locked up that you really have to watch out for.
Yes. And you can see that I keep his head bent around the entire time, except for when I am switching directions. Especially when we go from a standstill to moving, I like to make sure that the horse has his head bent around some, just because if the horse were to take off bucking or decide that it wanted to run away, what have you, it's a lot harder to gain control of the horse when the horse has his head straight and has his eyes set on something specific.
So you were getting a pretty good read on him being able to flip the lead rope over his head at this point, right?
Yes. I don't always do it one-handed like that. And generally, the first time I do it, switching directions, I'll actually get off, remount from the other side, and then go the other direction. The two times that I have noticed that horses take off bucking with you the most is the first time you go to switch directions on them, and the first time you ask for that trot to lope transition.
So those are the two biggest trouble spots people run into.
Yes. And I like to have the long lead rope on, even if I put a pair of reins on and attach them to my halter. I like to have a long lead rope so that if something happens, if he were to buck, if he were to take off, something that there's just no point in me trying to ride it out, I can bail off and I have that lead rope in my hand and I can correct him immediately. I don't have to go chasing off after him around the arena. I don't have to try to catch him. I don't have to worry about him stepping on anything or hurting himself. I already have control of him, and I can appropriately correct his behavior and then get right back on.
So with over 200 colts under your belt, you've pretty well disproved the old theory that you have to ride the bucks out and you have to ride it out and you can't get down.
Correct, and that's actually how I was originally taught, was the old cowboy way. And it didn't take very long before I started experimenting with different options and different ways of doing things, and it wasn't very long before I decided I don't know why anyone would do it the way people were originally taught.
If you're gonna make a career out of starting colts, I guess you would figure out pretty quickly if there was anything better besides trying to ride the bucks out.
I very seldom have a colt take off on a buck. Now, later on, things generally happen. Horses are horses after ride 10 or so. But those first few rides, I very rarely have a horse take off bucking with me.
So that was Dylan's first ride there. As you can see, he was pretty accepting of the whole thing. The most testing he did really was in the groundwork at the beginning.
Yep.
So.
If I hadn't done all that groundwork and corrected him about certain things, he would have fought me in the saddle, and it wouldn't have gone over so smoothly with me in the saddle as it did with me on the ground.
Yeah, the groundwork is what set that up to work so well.
Yes.
That you made sure all of your checklist was checked off.
Exactly. That's how you just set yourself up for a very successful first ride, by doing it that way.
All right, well, thanks for sharing some of that with us, Beth. And we encourage you all, if you have any interest in Beth's services, she does lessons and she takes on training horses as well. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be hearing from you soon. Thank you.